Xavier was born December 30th, 2002. Born healthy, what we were told normal. 10 fingers, 10 toes, all that fun stuff. He developed, I would say it was, they called it a first cold. It was his first hospitalization at 4 weeks old, but they didn't discover anything. At about 9 months old, he got his first real bad cold and was diagnosed with pneumonia. And from there, it just started, that's when everything just started okay, things are normal. He was struggling with weight gain, so he wasn't gaining weight normally. Everything he would eat, he would either poop out or vomit. It was really gross. And by the time he was approaching 18 months, his doctor finally okay, there's something really wrong here. They started running tests. The final test that they ran on Xavier was called a sweat test, which is typically what indicates, because of the sodium that they release, typically what indicates that they have cystic fibrosis. So at 18 months, it was May 4th, 2004, Xavier was finally diagnosed with cystic fibrosis.
Patients with cystic fibrosis usually have an excess production of mucus in their airways. They can also have an excess production of mucus in their digestive system, their liver and their pancreas. So it affects their quality of life. Okay, cystic fibrosis patients have a disorder, a genetic disorder that causes a protein in their body not to work properly. It is the cystic fibrosis transmembrane regulator. It's the CFTR gene, and they get a copy of it from each of their parents. So their epithelial cells are not able to move sodium chloride back and forth across their cells properly, which causes their mucus to become thick.
A protein called cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator, or CFTR, lines the apical membrane of epithelial cells and transports chloride into ASL. Chloride and sodium in ASL attract water. In patients with cystic fibrosis, various CFTR mutations impair chloride transport, causing sodium and water to leave ASL, thus dehydrating airway mucus. The dehydrated mucus flattens cilia and creates an environment suitable for obstruction, infection, and inflammation.
Pancreas is affected. It has a hard time releasing the necessary enzymes to break down food. So CF patients have a hard time with digestion, and they don't absorb calories the way that we do and get the nutrients that we do, so they have to eat a lot more than we do. It affects their liver as well. The liver ducts will get clogged because of the thicker mucus, and men with cystic fibrosis are unable to reproduce. It affects the sperm from doing its job, so they're not able to make babies, although CF women can carry babies.
So the life of a CFer, I think it would probably be best to explain it from the night before. So Xavier had a G-tube. He would receive a nutritional supplement overnight. So, he would connect himself in the evening time to his G-tube where he would get that overnight nutrition. And Xavier was also on TPN, which is an IV nutrition, because he was having such a difficult time gaining weight. So the morning would consist of unhooking him. And he actually was very independent. So he would unhook himself from his TPN, so his IV nutrition. He would unhook himself, and then he would unhook himself from his tube feed. And then from there, his tube feed had a cartridge, it's called Relazorb, that would infuse the enzymes that he needed in order to be able to absorb the nutrition, so he didn't have to take the enzymes early in the morning. However, he would have his antacid medications that he had to take. He had a few vitamins that he had to take. Orally, he had, if I recall correctly, 2 different maintenance antibiotics that he would take. And then he had his airway clearance treatments that he would have. So Xavier was on albuterol, which is an inhaled airway, and that one, if it was running through the nebulizer, that one would run for about 10 minutes, and then As soon as he was done with that, he would do a hypertonic saline to loosen up the mucus so he can cough it out. Hypertonic saline took about another 10 minutes. He then did Pulmozyme. Pulmozyme ran for about another 10 minutes, and then he would alternate. There were 2 maintenance inhaled antibiotics that he would alternate 1 month and 1 month. One was Toby, one was Cayston. Toby would average about 20 to 30 minutes, and his Cayston was about 5 minutes. And he also had the vest treatment, which the vest is basically what shakes everything and moves everything up. So it would average from about an hour to an hour and a half of breathing treatments. It was 2014 when the doctors first mentioned transplant.
So there's no cure for cystic fibrosis, and life expectancy depends on the severity of the disease and how well the patients take care of themselves. And there's regimens set in place for them, regarding their medications and their ability to move their mucus. Because there is no cure, a lot of CF patients look towards being candidates for lung transplants. And if it usually is something that is a take or they are qualified for, they can have a lung transplant and they usually have a better quality of life.
In 2015 is when we took our first trip out to Houston for a transplant evaluation. And at that point, Xavier was tabled. So he was considered a perfect candidate for a double lung transplant, but it would be too soon. In June of 2016, he had his first collapsed lung. From there is when his lungs really started declining. So he got his first collapsed lung in June, got another collapsed lung in November, and then again in December, and then January, and then February. And by March is when they were like, okay, it's time to send him back to Houston for reevaluation. So in March of 2017, they medically transported us out to Houston to Texas Children's Hospital for a reevaluation for lung transplant. So May 2nd, 2017, Xavier was officially listed for the lung transplant. And on June 2nd, he received his page.
Today I got the page around 8 o'clock. So as you can see, we're now in the hospital just waiting and waiting. Now it's just actually waiting for the lungs to get in. Update. So as you can see, I officially have my new lungs and I'm breathing very good now.
So post-transplant, again, did really well post-transplant, and he was really excited about it. So his transplant team really attributed just his whole attitude and how he was about getting the transplant. They attributed a lot of that to how successful it was. So we were actually sent home about 3 weeks early to, day by day and everything. Unfortunately, very quickly caught an infection. Turns out he had developed an infection in his lungs that caused a mass in his airway, right, like around the lung and the airway, and that just started growing. There was obviously something very wrong. So the transplant team, again, transported him from Phoenix Children's Hospital back to Houston.
So November 9th, I got sent out here because I had nocardia in my lung, my right lung. And after that, the mass got bigger, so the doctors decided to go in for a surgery and take out the mass or reduce it. And they found that if they were to do that, it would leave a hole in my airway and they wouldn't be able to fix it, so that would cause major problems.
In end of November, early December, they decided to place a stent in the airway in order to keep the airway open. Early December, the doctors sat all of us down with Xavier to discuss what his wishes would be in terms of him staying alive. And he was very, very adamant about wanting to live. He had told me that he's like, I can't die. There's too many people that are depending on me staying alive. I can't die. And, you know, from then he really did start, you know, showing improvement. So we had from December through February where the mass wasn't going away. The mass wasn't getting smaller, but Xavier was getting better. Very end of February, it was right before Campo spring break. The doctors determined that he was well enough to leave Houston, but not well enough to be out of the hospital. So they, in order for him to be closer to home, they transported him back from Houston to Phoenix Children's Hospital.
Hey guys, it's been a while since I've done a video update for you guys, but just to let you guys know, I am back in Phoenix, my home state, and I've been here for about a week now, and I'm doing really, really well. That I think I'm ready to actually go home. But to catch you guys up, I had my first bronch here in Phoenix last Wednesday, and that went very, very well. The doctors were actually surprised when they went in because they were expecting more mucus and clottage, but there wasn't as much because I'm actually doing a very good job with my breathing treatments and getting it out myself. So that really helped them out. So I think I'm at a point that I'm ready to go home, and now it's just up to the doctors.
The first, it was a bronchoscopy that he had. The first one here in Phoenix was successful. By the time it came time for the second one, Xavier was experiencing edema. His kidneys were beginning to fail. And Xavier is the one that requested the bronch. He told the doctor he needed a clean out. And when the doctors went in to do the clean out, because of the edema and the swelling, it resulted in Xavier's airway clearance being compromised, and they were unable to extubate. So he had to stay on the breathing tube and sedated. And from there, they sent us via emergency back to Houston, and they put him on dialysis because he went into kidney failure. And then from there, just continued to decline.